Everything you've been told about beating procrastination has one thing in common. It assumes your brain is the enemy, that the procrastination is wrong, that the resistance is a problem to overcome, that if you could just push hard enough, long enough, you'd break through. But what if that assumption is exactly what's been keeping you stuck? What if your brain isn't working against you at all? What if it's working perfectly, just toward a completely different goal than the one you think you have? That distinction changes everything, and it changes what you do about it. You've been fighting this for a while. I don't mean weeks. I mean, this is a pattern that's followed you through jobs, through projects, through every fresh start that felt promising and every quiet fade that followed. And somewhere along the way, you started accumulating a toolkit. Time blocking, accountability partners, the 2-minute rule, eat the frog, the Pomodoro technique, body doubling, habit trackers. And this is where most people get it wrong, not because those things are useless, but because they're all variations on the same approach. More structure, more pressure, more ways to force the behavior that your brain keeps resisting. And if forcing worked, you'd have cracked this by now. You haven't. Not because you're not trying hard enough, but because you're trying in the wrong direction. Let me describe what this actually feels like. You sit down to work, the task is in front of you, you know what needs to happen, and then nothing. Not boredom, not distraction, something heavier than that, a kind of low-level dread that doesn't have a clear source, a resistance that doesn't respond to logic. You can talk yourself through why this matters. You can remind yourself of the deadline. You can list the consequences of not starting. And the resistance just sits there, unmoved. And here's the part that really stings. You end up doing something else. Not nothing, something. Emails, admin, research, anything that feels like moving forward without carrying the weight of the actual thing. And at the end of the day, you feel that particular kind of tired that comes from working hard while avoiding the one thing that mattered. That experience has a name, and understanding it is where the shift begins. Your brain isn't resisting work. It's protecting you from something it perceives as a threat, and the protection mechanism is sophisticated, automatic, pre-conscious, faster than your ability to reason your way around it, which is why logic doesn't work, why knowing you should do something and being able to make yourself do it are two completely separate things. But here's what changes things. When you understand what the brain is actually protecting you from, you stop trying to overpower it and you start working with it instead. And that shift from fighting to collaborating is where procrastination actually ends, not through more effort, through less resistance. Here's what's actually happening. Your brain has one primary function that overrides everything else. Keep you safe. Not productive, not successful, not fulfilled, just safe. And to your nervous system, uncertainty feels like danger. A task with a vague outcome, threat. A project where failure is visible, threat. Something that matters enough that doing it badly would hurt, significant threat. And this is where it gets really interesting. Your nervous system doesn't distinguish between a physical threat and a psychological one. The same system that would protect you from something genuinely dangerous activates in response to an email you don't know how to write. And when that system activates, it doesn't debate with you, it acts. Avoidance, delay, distraction, not laziness, protection. So every time you've tried to force your way through that, you've essentially been trying to reason with a system that doesn't respond to reason. It responds to safety, to clarity, to low stakes, to certainty that the first step is survivable. So what does it mean in practice to work with your brain instead of against it? It means three things. First, reduce the perceived threat, not by lowering your standards, by reducing the size of the step until your nervous system stops flagging it as dangerous. A task called write the report is enormous to your brain, undefined, high stakes, open-ended. A task called write the first paragraph, rough draft, doesn't need to be good, is survivable. Same work, different threat level, different response from your nervous system. Second, regulate before you work, not after. Most people try to push through stress and calm down once the work is done, but a dysregulated nervous system cannot access the prefrontal cortex effectively, which is exactly where your planning, decision making, and follow through live. You're trying to drive with the handbrake on. 60 seconds of deliberate breathing before you sit down to work is not a soft option. It's the psychological prerequisite for the kind of focused work you're trying to do. And third, reward completion, not effort. Your brain learns through consequence, and right now it may have learned that work leads to stress, to criticism, or the uncomfortable feeling of not being good enough. That loop needs to change, and it changes through deliberate, consistent rewarding of completion, however small the completion is. These three principles, reduce the threat, regulate first, reward completion, are the foundation of everything I built the Momentum Reset method around, because I'd spent years trying the alternative, more discipline, more systems, more forcing, and I kept hitting the same wall. The method works differently. The micro-mission shift, pillar 1, is specifically designed to reduce the threat level of any task to the point where your nervous system stops treating it as something to avoid. The 555 reset breath, pillar 5, is a 60-second nervous system regulation tool you use before you start working. Not when you're already overwhelmed, before. And the dopamine anchor, pillar 3, is a structured approach to rewiring the reward associations your brain has built around productive work. Not through motivation, through neuroscience. The system doesn't ask you to fight your brain, it asks you to understand it well enough to stop giving it reasons to protect you from your own goals. Let's keep going, because the practical application of this is simpler than the explanation suggests. Here's the reframe I want you to carry out of this video. Procrastination is not a character flaw. It's not evidence of weakness. It's not proof that you're not cut out for this. It's just information. Your nervous system is telling you that something about this task, its size, its ambiguity, its emotional weight, exceeds what it currently feels safe to engage with. And that is a solvable problem, not a personality problem, not a discipline problem, a design problem. The task isn't designed correctly for your brain. The environment isn't set up to reduce the threat. The reward system isn't calibrated to reinforce completion. Fix the design and the behavior changes. That's what working with your brain looks like. Not forcing, not white knuckling, designing. So here's what this looks like today. Shift 1, redesign the task. Take whatever you've been avoiding and ask one question. What is the smallest version of this that still counts as progress? Not the smallest version you'd be proud of, the smallest version that moves the needle in any way. That's your starting point. Not the whole task, just that. Shift 2, regulate before you start. Before you open the document, before you sit down at your desk, 60 seconds. Breathe in for 5, hold for 5, out for 5 times. You're not relaxing. You're shifting your nervous system from threat detection mode to the state where focused work is actually possible. That 60 seconds is not optional, it's the prerequisite. Shift 3, close the loop deliberately. When you finish even the small version, stop. Don't immediately move to the next thing. Acknowledge that you finished. Say it out loud if that helps. Write it down. Let your brain register the completion, because your brain learns from what gets reinforced. And if completion is never acknowledged, it never becomes something your brain associates with reward. Reinforce it every time, no matter how small. Here's what I've come to understand about procrastination. We spend so much energy being frustrated with our brains, wishing they worked differently, treating every episode of avoidance as evidence of some fundamental inadequacy. But your brain is doing exactly what it has evolved to do. It's protecting you, conserving energy, avoiding what it perceives as threat. The problem was never your brain. The problem was that nobody ever taught you how to communicate with it properly. Once you learn that, the relationship changes. You stop fighting. You start collaborating, and the work that once felt impossible starts to feel like something else entirely. If this gave you a different way of seeing it, there's a free Procrastination Reset guide linked in the description. It's a simple 4-step process for the exact moment resistance shows up and you don't know what to do with it. Think of it as the start of a different conversation with your own brain. You're not broken, you've just been working against yourself. Now you know how to stop. Subscribe if you want to keep going. This is what this channel is built on. One more thing before you go. Everything I've just described works beautifully in theory. And most people who hear it have a version of the same response. They understand it, they agree with it, they feel genuinely relieved, and then they go back to their desk and the task is still there and the resistance is still there. And the understanding doesn't seem to be doing very much. So there's a specific reason that happens, and it's the gap that most productivity content completely fails to address. The gap between understanding something and being able to act on it in the moment it actually matters. That's what the next video is about. Watch this next.